Benedict Spencer with me, Conservative commentator. Just before we get to our next guest, Benedict, it is interesting. I mean, certainly an awful lot of calls on the board, lots of people getting in touch. 0344 499 1000 if you want to be among those getting in touch. And people are just very disappointed in the BBC. And again, the BBC, even two people resigning, two most senior people from very well-paid six-figure salary jobs, basically that isn't going to be enough because they clearly don't get it.
They don't get it, and people are irritated because they are the ones paying for this. And actually, I think it's right that we hold the BBC to the highest possible standards, given that it is the organisation through which we all have to fund in order to be able to watch anything else in this country. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, actually, we demand the very best. And that actually, every time there is an instance of dropping the ball or bias, that they get a proper slap on the wrist for this sort of thing. I think that's fair.
Well, they're going to have to start being accountable, I think. I mean, if we have to be accountable to Ofcom, I think they should be, whereas actually they're accountable to themselves first stop, aren't they? Well, look, let's talk about this to someone who's a former BBC executive. Friend of the show, Roger Bolton. A very good morning to you, Roger.
Good morning, Julia. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, it's going to start off a pleasure. I know it's going to go...
You're so impartial. I mean, you're just open and to all points of view. It's wonderful.
I am open to all points of view, but it doesn't mean I agree with all points of view, because that would be weird, wouldn't it?
It would. It would.
Let's talk about what is your point of view in terms of this, just in terms of the decision of Tim Davie and Deborah Turness to resign in the wake, particularly of the revelations in this internal report about this Trump documentary. But there's a lot more besides that. I mean, I would say Gaza and goodness knows what else besides. But what do you make of the decision of them to resign in the first place?
Well, I think that clearly there was an initial problem which we could discuss, but the fact that BBC was silent for the last week and that the BBC at the top seems to be hopelessly divided and couldn't get any statement of any sort out meant that they were just being hit and hit and hit. And eventually, of course, we're going to have the chairman today, allegedly, going to write a reply to the, finally, going to give a BBC view on all of this. So they've compounded what was a very difficult situation. I think lost a very good Director General in two. And but I should remind you that 4 BBC's Director Generals have resigned or been sacked in the last 40 years. 2 chairmen have resigned or been sacked. It's a tough old job.
Yeah.
You don't blame Tim Davie, who can probably earn about 5 times his salary elsewhere, after 5 years saying, I can't cope with this, particularly when you're faced with a divided board, a divided country. And I think this is the most important thing. I think trust throughout this country is difficult to find. We've got a polarization going on all the time. People are listening to their own perspectives reflected back to them. If you're in the middle of the road, which the BBC ought to be, you get run down by both sides.
Yeah, and one of the defences the BBC is often given is that we get criticised from both sides, so we must be doing something right. And
you could be wrong. They could be wrong, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think they are wrong on that. But I think I agree with you, we're a divided country, and I don't like the polarisation. I hate it. Like, I choose to follow various people on my X feed, for instance, and I keep getting defaulted to a For You, and they're sending me stuff that, no, I've chosen who I want to follow, and I follow a big range of people. I watch and listen to lots of different media because I want to know every different point of view, and I also want to test my own opinions by reading and hearing other people's opinions that disagree with mine to see if, I've got it wrong myself. And I have changed my mind on a number of issues as a result of doing that. Here's the thing, though. The BBC, as far as I can tell from everyone I speak to, from the bottom to the top, pretty much think that they are neutral. They think that they're not biased, they're not prejudiced, and this is just a horrible attack. And even Nick Robinson is in big sort of statement on Radio 4 this morning, and he's put it out on social media. Basically, there's been this stuff, it's an internal and an external attack on the future of the BBC by the enemies of the BBC. I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of the message going out. And a lot of people at the BBC seem to share that. I think the problem is something different. I think the problem is that they are so biased, so caught up in their little liberal, progressive, lefty bubble of central London bubble. They don't realise how out of touch they are, which is why they all look so shocked about Brexit.
It's a great
why they're all so shocked about Trump.
Can I have a word, Julia? Thanks. First of all, a lot of the BBC output doesn't come from London, it comes from Manchester and elsewhere. Secondly, of course, the BBC has a lot of young people who are liberally inclined, a lot of Jewish people who support Israel, a lot of Muslims who don't. It's combined of a whole range of people. And the danger is, you're absolutely right, that there's a mindset. But then that's what you should have senior editors for, gnarled old people who look at this and say, no, if we could get down to the facts, it always helps if you get down to the facts on these things. The fact is that BBC wrongly edited, or rather the independent company working for it, wrongly edited a piece of material about Trump. But of course, Trump rejoices because he encouraged the Capitol Hill rioters to go there. He tried to steal, as he say, called the election a big steal. So he's very happy with that. Vladimir Putin will be delighted with what's happening at the moment because the BBC's reporting is pretty tough on him, and he'll be delighted that it's in trouble. When it comes to this country, we are so divided on so many issues that it is very difficult. Now, the BBC makes mistakes. Clearly, its executive, the board structure doesn't work at the moment. But I honestly believe that it's impossible to impose a single view on the BBC and tell its staff to do it.
No,
Look,
I don't want a view. That's where this is the thing. When you say divided, people are divided and like, here's my opinion whether I think that mass uncontrolled immigration is a bad thing. And someone else, working at The Guardian, could say, I think that mass uncontrolled immigration is a great thing.
And the BBC shouldn't have a view.
And the BBC shouldn't have a view. And in its choice of stories and in the way it tells those stories and who it interviews, it shouldn't betray that view. But it does. And the reason why is because to a man and a woman, they take the leftist view.
But you're entitled to your view, and I'm entitled to my view,
but
which
they
is
aren't.
Wrong.
But they aren't. But this is where the job of the BBC is to present facts.
Yes, but it's difficult, isn't it, when people don't want to face those facts?
No, it's not difficult. People can choose to ignore them. The BBC's job is to present facts. I don't want to hear the BBC's opinion on anything.
We agree
I want them
about that.
to tell me the facts. No, but the point is,
Julia, you and I agree. Julia and I are
facts.
arguing about nothing because we both agree the BBC should stick to the facts. The problem is...
No, you said it was hard for them to do that. I said I don't think it is. I don't think facts are hard at all.
I think it's hard for all of us to recognise our prejudices, put them aside and try and concentrate on the facts. And we all look for, on the whole, we look for facts which will support our predetermined position. I think they're like, I'm going to find things out. The BBC's job is to say, yeah, there are facts over here which aren't so convenient for you, and to present you with a rounded picture.
And they don't
When they don't do that, they should be criticised. But they try to do it genuinely.
No, I think they don't try to do it. Look, on climate change, they don't do it. On trans issues, they don't do it.
Well,
on Gaza, they don't do it.
Hold
on. On Brexit, they didn't do it until they were legally required to in the 2016 election.
This is just not true.
It 100% is.
Julia, you and your channel network have a particular perspective. Fine, I'm delighted.
I have my perspective. It's not my. I have only my personal views that I give. I don't give anyone else's, and I don't expect anyone else here to agree with my views.
People who listen to your channel can make that judgment. But what I'm saying is, it's quite fine for you to do opinionated stuff.
That's what I'm employed to do.
That's fine. We want an organisation which you can rely upon not to do that and to present us with the facts. In my view, the BBC generally does that. It's got a highest trust recognition of any media organisation.
People don't realise they're being lied to. Their climate coverage is so unscientific and unfact-based, it's a joke. Their pushing of trans agenda over women's rights, completely unscientific, unmedically proven and dangerous, I would say. Their coverage of Gaza has been, immoral and I would say dangerous.
Hold on. Can we just hold on? If we take Gaza alone, right, one of the fundamental problems is, as you know, that the Israeli government has not allowed BBC.
That's not the problem.
Gaza.
That's not the problem.
Secondly, it is true. It is absolutely true that there is a problem identifying the precise number of people who've been killed on either side. But the BBC has to report the facts, and the facts in that case are that vastly more people in Gaza have died than Israelis. BBC shouldn't make a judgment about whether that's good, bad, or give more sympathy. But in
they quote Hamas figures. There's never been a war in history, Roger, where any government can say how many people have died in that war on the next day.
You will know this.
There's never been a single war in history.
You will know this, that when the BBC reports figures from Hamas, they say it's Hamas figures. They try and get the figures out of the Israeli government, which refuses to give any. But if you go to Haaretz...
because there aren't any official figures.
No, go to Haaretz, which is a very good Israeli newspaper. The paradox here is that within Israel itself, there is far more criticism of the Netanyahu government than there is here. And, all the BBC has to do is
because it's a vibrant democracy, which is why we should probably give more credence to things the Israeli government says, even though we can disagree with and criticise as the Israelis can, than we should to a terrorist organisation. Bearing in mind, come on, Roger, bearing in mind that Deborah Turness one of the most senior figures at the BBC who's just resigned, head of news, she's put out repeated internal memos to staff saying you should always remind viewers that there's Hamas terrorists, but there's also, you know, the Hamas political wing running the actual government in Gaza, as if these were separate organisations. This woman has no business having anything to do with news coverage.
Hold on. That's not dissimilar. For example, going back in the Troubles, saying that, look, if you look at the Republican side, you've got Sinn Féin, then question mark about now, and the IRA, and they work together, and one does the politics and one does the military. That was true. Now, of course they're working together, and of course it's true of Hamas. It has a political wing, it has a military wing. That's a fact. What's wrong with saying that's a fact?
If you think that is the salient quote fact in what's going on in Gaza, it's an absolute
joke. It'd be naive
if you thought.
It would be naive if you thought that Hamas wasn't operating on different levels, and that it's committed to the eradication of the State of Israel, that it commits terrorism. It's a vile organisation. Absolutely true.
A terrorist organisation, which the BBC won't say.
But the BBC's job is to report on all organisations, violent otherwise. There are also people, by the way, who would say, well, actually an Israeli court found that a member of Netanyahu's government is racist. Now, you have to report these things.
Of course they can report these things. I've got no issue. I never cover up any news at all.
You have the BBC, reports things that you find uncomfortable and things you find comfortable.
I'm not remotely uncomfortable with any facts whatsoever, whether they agree with my viewpoint, because my views on things are formed by knowing the facts. And the reason why the British people are so ill-informed about what's happening in Gaza, so ill-informed about the dangers of the trans propaganda that's impacting their children, the reason why they're so ill-informed about things like climate change and net zero policy is partly down to the fault of the BBC and their incredibly biased reporting, which is way beyond selection of facts. It's not even any facts involved.
You're entitled to your opinion, but it is your opinion.
It's a fact-based opinion, though.
And it's extremely one-sided opinions, and I disagree with the large
facts.
No, well, you see, there we are. We'll never agree.
I watch reports on the BBC repeatedly, which I know are factually untrue.
What you say is factually based. What you say is the fact, right? Other people have different views and say the facts are over here.
Different facts.
The BBC has
either the Great Barrier Reef is damaged beyond repair and is all bleached and is never coming back, or it is. I mean, it's one or the other, isn't it? And there's clear scientific proof that it's actually a regular bleaching event and that it's coming back and repairing itself just fine. But the BBC doesn't report that because it's not part of their agenda.
Well,
that's not fact-based reporting.
That's not true. That's not true. I don't know. You see, the trouble is, you're going to put this, that, and t'other across its output. The BBC has got to make sure that it represents a range of views, but where it can establish the facts, it should do so, and where it can't, it should have a range of views, and I think it broadly does it. The fact that in many cases, the opinions that are expressed are not ones you share doesn't mean that they're biased against you. You have a right to demand that your perspective is there. But it's very...
But I'm forced... No. The key thing is I don't want to hear the BBC's opinion. I keep saying this. I want them to present some facts, and they can say this side says and this side says. But they don't do that. They have a literal policy of not having people on who what they call climate change deniers.
No, they don't.
They quite literally do. I know a number of people who've been told categorically by figures at the BBC that the reason they are no longer invited onto their shows is because...
No, hold on. Hold on. If you want a discussion about climate change, you should go for climate change experts. And the BBC should represent...
Like Greta?
Hold on. And the BBC should find, if there are climate change experts who disagree with the consensus...
there are loads of them.
Hold on, let me finish. Agree with the consensus, they should put them on. What you can't do is have, let's say... 19 and a half or 20 people agree on climate change experts this way, and there isn't another person on the other side. You refer to the fact that there are other views, but you don't give them the same weight. If the sort of majority of scientists and others think something,
that's not how science works,
the
Roger.
Minority are represented.
Otherwise, the sun would still be revolving around us, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's literally not how science works.
No, hold on. You are right in the sense that science advances by the consensus being challenged, but it's challenged by people of a certain quality, not somebody who happens to have heard something on the internet.
Okay,
and whatever.
let's go with the example of COVID. I was the sole broadcaster during many long months of COVID who was challenging the lockdown narrative. I mean, literally every press conference, BBC, Sky, everyone else asking the same question again. When are we locking down more? When are we locking down more? I know I was in a very, very small minority, along with people like Toby Young and Brendan Early, people like that. But we've been completely proved right by the facts.
Hold on. Can I answer that one? Right. You had the British government, supported by the opposition, the government, a Conservative government of Boris Johnson, saying there should be a lockdown. In a national emergency like that,
there we go.
Hold on. In a national emergency like that, the BBC has a responsibility both to represent the government point of view and give great weight to it because it is a national emergency, and then look for those who are informed who disagree. If they don't find some people,
found plenty of people.
They should
Oxford
do that.
University professors.
This was a national emergency. Clearly, as everybody said subsequently, we didn't as a country deal with it very well.
No, people said at the time. Oxford University professors, eminent professors,
but the point I'm telling
experts in epidemiology said at the time.
Yeah, but these are political judgments. They're fine judgments about what's the best thought.
That's my point, Roger.
It's not for the BBC to tell you what's the best political judgment.
No,
it's not
exactly.
To tell
Roger, you're making my point, not your point.
No, I'm just saying that you may be absolutely brilliant, but the BBC can't assume that you're always right. I mean, I'm sure you are.
I absolutely don't assume I'm always right, but I try not to think I'm right if I haven't got a single fact on my side. Roger, we're going to have to leave it there. It's been a pleasure having you on. Former BBC executive. A quick word for Benedict Spencer. We're going to have to go to a break because I'm going to get told off.
I'm just delighted to know that, scientific consensus is formed by people of a certain quality. Because, of course, most of the scientific consensus of the modern era was literally created by gentlemen amateurs with too much time on their hands. So it's good to know that I still have a value.